Hello everyone and welcome to the showdown between Bretonnia, led by King Louis, and the Vampire Counts, who are going to be led by Vladdy Daddy. So let's jump right into this match, guys, and have some fun. So in this game, I wanted to try a build that was a little bit unusual, essentially one with King Lewin and a very dominant aerial force. You can see I do have King Louis, and he actually synergizes pretty well with the Royal Pegasus Knights. So Royal Pegasus Knights are an anti-large specialist, very, very fast. You can see they have 105 movement speed, 61 weapon strength, which definitely isn't bad, and they also do have a bonus versus large. One of their kind of main issues against big monsters like Terrorgeist and even against Blood Knights is that they don't really have the best armor piercing values. But if you team up with King Louis, and let's go ahead and take a look at his Sword of Couronne. So this actually lowers melee defense by 27 and armor by 30. So you can get some pretty strong timing pushes with the Royal Pegasus Knights with King Louis if you time it correctly. But I still don't think that Royal Pegasus Knights are terribly competitive, but again, they still can be useful in each situations. So had my opponent gone like double Terrorgeist, which is somewhat standard, honestly, King Lewin plus Royal Pegasus Knights and Lore of Life, if you do have it, and you can see here, I have a Damsel with Lore of Life and Earthblood. They can do pretty darn well in the air. They're much faster than the Terrorgeist and definitely give you some decent options. In worst case scenario, you can use the Royal Pegasus Knights to take out some of these Cryptors. They can go after the Mortis Engine, which is, of course, a large target entity. Or if some Blood Knights are, fighting your Cav here, and this is something I really like to do. So if you have Grail Knights, they're fighting Blood Knights, which is a very even matchup, you can then slam into the back of those Blood Knights with the Royal Pegasus Knights and really, really just crumble them incredibly quickly. So for the rest of my army, in the front line, I do have 3 Foot Squires, and Foot Squires are pretty decent. I feel like you kind of need something like this in the front line. You could use Men-at-Arms with Halberds or Foot Squires, but Squires do pretty well against Graveguard. On top of that, with their anti-infantry bonus, they can cut through fodder, skeletons, zombies, all those kind of things. So I feel like they're relatively safe. And if you do have a Grail Reliquary, you can see they're going to be rocking 96 leadership and immunity to psychology. So definitely very solid stuff. One Grail Reliquary right here. In the back, I do have 3 groups of the, I think 3, and let me see if there's a 4th one. No, it looks like there's only 3 groups of Peasant Bowmen with fire arrows, which are really good against Vampire Counts. These guys have to do fire damage, obviously, the whole reason you bring them, and that actually gives you a pretty good bonus against Mortis Engines, which are somewhat popular, and also I think Cryptors are going to be taking extra fire damage. Let's actually go ahead and check, and yes, they are a regenerating unit, so they will take an additional 25% against fire, which are really good, especially considering they only have 15 armor. So some good utility there. If they have Fellbats, Mortis Engines, Corpse Guards, like those are all very good targets for the peasants. So to protect the peasants, the main way to shut them down is just to spam zombie summons on top of them. I always like to put a couple groups of regular Men-at-Arms. So these are sword infantry that are going to be a little bit more effective at cutting through zombies and chaff units than like halberds and spears. So I put 2 of them in the back behind the archers, and then protecting my flanks, I have 2 groups of Men-at-Arms with polearms. So that's pretty much it for my army. For my opponent, front line of Graveguard, just standard Graveguard. You don't really need the armor piercing variant, honestly, with their anti-infantry and pretty decent melee defense. They usually do a pretty good job against like Foot Squires and pretty much any Bretonnian infantry, and are more durable with their silver shields. He has some Crypt Ghouls, which can really, really munch on these guys. I mean, Crypt Ghouls won't do great against Foot Squires, but they'll munch through my other troops pretty effectively. Skeleton Spears in the whole back line to fend off Cav. Most Bretonnian players in this matchup, at least from what I've seen, typically bring like a couple Grail Knights, 3 or 4, so having a bunch of Skeleton Spears is very strong. And Claw of Nagash, very, very solid pick there. Always a force to be reckoned with, but again, it will be getting pressured. And then Vlad von Karstein with Raised Dead, Invocation of Nehek, and the Karstein Ring. So without further ado, guys, let's get this show on the road. So right now, I was just trying to get my Royal Pegasus Knights and see if I could get a free pick on those Fellbats, but my opponent was doing a pretty good job, and Fellbats are actually faster. They have 110 speed, so I kept trying to like feign in as I was like running away and then getting these charges, but the Fellbats just always squeaked away. It was so annoying. I really wanted to kill those things, but King Louis, obviously only having 100 speed, has no chance of really catching them. So my opponent has a very secure formation. I'm not really going to have any openings to get in the back line here, so I'm just going to be using my Grail Knights in the front, and I will be pulling the Royal Pegasus Knights in as well, and just have them do a little bit of a counter charge on the Cryptors, who are a very, very good candidate for their anti-large bonus there. So we're just kind of scoring up here. The Peasant Archers are going to be getting in position, so you can see the fire arrows are going to be shooting in immediately at the Cryptors. So Cryptors are just going to monster mash Foot Squire, so I didn't want my front line to just get massacred, so basically I was like, okay, I need to do that. And I do miss the charge there, a little bit sloppy on my part, but regardless, they're taking those fire arrows like champs. You can see they've already taken quite a bit of damage there. So these Foot Squires are going to take a bit of a beating. My other Foot Squires will be charging in, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure I grabbed the Grail Knights here in a moment, and they will be charging into some of these. And yeah, here come the Pegasus Knights. So the Pegasus Knights do land, and you have to be very careful with them. You can't like leave them in sustained combat for too long, because sometimes their models get mucked up with some low tier troops, but just look how hard those Cryptors are getting dumpstered. So the fire arrows plus the Royal Pegasus Knights getting an amazing charge, and once we melt the Cryptors, he's not going to have too much bite in his front line, which is going to be nice. On the other side, I do send King Louis to fight the Mortis Engine and Vlad, but Vlad is going to be summoning some zombies, most likely right here. And these Grail Knights get a nice little charge on the other group of Cryptors on the far side. Just look how hard they're getting massacred by those fire arrows. And really, I don't I don't really like, I mean, Crypt Wars on paper do seem like they're okay. They can beat Foot Squires. They're a pretty good option against Cav because they have solid AP and poison, but more often than not, I find that they're just kind of a little bit lackluster in my experience, in this matchup at least. So I keep trying to get my Pegasus Knights away, but sometimes if 1 or 2 Pegasus Knights models is stuck, you can see this guy over here, it tethers back your whole group, which is such an annoying thing. So the Royal Pegasus Knights do get pulled back in, but you can see that those Crypt Wars are pretty much monster mashed and done for. But still, my opponent has a far superior front line. He has these Crypt Ghouls, he has a Graveguard. Looks like there's going to be a big old juicy Invocation of Nehek going down over here or something. Oh no, this was actually the Dwellers below. So I love bringing Dwellers, and just look at the damage. It is melting these Crypt Ghouls and these Graveguard and these Skeleton Spears. And I knew that my Foot Squires were going to go quietly into the good night, but I just needed to do it. It was just too much value. So I do think that's a worthwhile ability to bring. So I usually bring the Dwellers below and the Earthblood, and it covers most of my bases. So my opponent did get into the back here, and you can see the brave Sons of Bretonnia. These men-at-arms are going to rush in and fight the zombie hordes, which is really nice. And I think when you're playing Bretonnia with like a very infantry style of play like I am, having auxiliary troops and keeping them in reserves and not committing everything to the front is a very good idea, because you're going to lose that frontline engagement usually. And they're going to trickle in, they'll be a little bit beat up, so then you pull in your reserves, you pull back your archers, and then you kind of form a secondary battle line, which I found to be very effective. So in the back, King Louis was able to get on this Mortis Engine. You can see he just tears that thing apart, which was definitely very nice. That thing was really doing a ton of damage in my front line, but if you look, you can see the Vampire Counts do have the Monster Mash in the front line. He has one group of Crypt Wars that are still alive. My Grail Knights did a pretty good job killing the one group, but then they got dragged down by Crypt Wars and Spears, and of course Vlad was there, so they're going to be a little bit beat up. And I'm basically just using my Pegasus Knights in the back to just clean things up. You can see they're fighting these Fellbats in the air, which is kind of ridiculous, because Fellbats are actually, I think, infantry-sized, so they're not going to take a bunch of damage. But still, I'm able to clean them up, which is nice, just freeing up my archers, re-securing my secondary formation, and, you know, just trying to stay alive here. So the Grail Reliquary is surrounded, unfortunately, but it is keeping these men-at-arms in the fight, so these guys are holding back a horde of Vampire Counts units, so a little bit of a mistake for my opponent. He should just maybe keep the Crypt Ghouls and like some Spears and then move everything else to pressure my back line, but it's pretty easy to mistake to make with the Vampire Counts. So over here, Vlad von Karstein is going to be fighting against King Louis, so Louis is just going deep, and I did pop the Lion's Shield just to get some magic resist. I figured I might as well. In this matchup, it's still okay to bring the Lion's Shield. I often get rid of it, but it is an okay one because sometimes you'll see Manfred von Karstein and Lore of Death, and they're just going to be using Spirit Leech and other effects like that, so it can be okay. So right now, I'm just trying to re-secure my firing line. My opponent did have some zombies over here, so I did pull the Knights of Bretonnia. These Grail Knights have come in, and they should be able to clear up this chaff relatively quickly. But this is definitely good. My firing line is back in position. You can see that they're shooting into some of these Crypt Ghouls right here who are just going to be roasted by the Fires of Bretonnia. And I think these guys are actually weak to fire too, if I'm not mistaken. Disintegrating. No, they're actually not. So they don't have any regenerating, so they're not going to be taking additional fire damage. But regardless, they're still a very lightly armored target and definitely an ideal candidate for these archers. So the Peasant Bowmen are going to be shooting into them. This blob is still being held up by these heroes. So you can see these men-at-arms with polearms doing a very good job. And I believe I'm getting another Dwellers below. So this is just so powerful. So you can see the Vampire Counts blob is just going to be evaporated right here. Negative leadership just tanking. Dwellers below is still a very good ability despite nerfs. That's something that people often do, like in this game. They'll see something gets nerfed, like Cygors get nerfed, or Dwellers below gets nerfed, or Final Transmutation. And, you know, they just kind of forget about it. And I've noticed that as a little bit of a pattern in the metagame, whereas those abilities are all still very good. Cygors are good. Final Transmutation, as you guys have seen with the Geltoning, is very, very powerful still. So definitely don't write those things off, guys. So over here, the Grail Knights are going to be charging in. He's just using zombies. So I'm just like, rather than committing all my forces to this mainline fight, I'm just doing the best I can to kind of secure my back line, keep my archers firing, and just maximize the efficiency with their ammunition. So still shooting into this blob here, you can see these Crypt Ghouls are actually getting melted, and these men-at-arms are just beast moding it, and it almost makes me wonder if they would be a better choice in the front line with their, you know, really high melee defense. But again, the light armor is a bit of an issue against Graveguard and Crypt Ghouls. So over here, King Lewin, you know, I saw this big blob was coming, 65 Crypt Ghouls, you know, there's Graveguard here, Vlad, so I was like, I'm just going to commit King Lewin to the frontline fight, and he's just been going ham bone over here, just keeping these guys down. And this is a big horde that if they were able to start pushing back and pressuring my back line, would be very scary. So I'm just using King Lewin and cycle charging. And you can see the fire arrows from the peasant hordes are just shooting in here and probably doing a ton of damage against Crypt Ghouls and mostly lightly armored targets. I mean, Graveguard obviously have 90 and silver shield, so you never want to target them with archers. It's a massive waste. I mean, unless you're playing like Dark Elves and you have like Dark Shards or something, but otherwise it's probably not worth it. So in the back, just continuing to secure my lines with the Grail Knights. They probably have a lot of kills. Yeah, 150 kills here. I do have some Foot Squires and Men-at-Arms kind of rallying here, so So I did get caught a little bit with my Damsel with the Lore of Life. He was able to get me with the Sternsman and the Tithe, which is pretty funny considering they're both horribly slow and I have a horse. But regardless, my men-at-arms come in here, and these guys are just the true patriots. Bretonnia just throwing karate kicks on zombies. I guess they haven't seen zombie movies. Usually that kind of stuff doesn't work, but regardless, in Total War it does. So the men-at-arms still holding strong, up to 75 kills for, even though a lot of it is against chaff, for a unit that costs, what is it, like 250 or 300 gold, that's really, really good value here. So the archers continuing to shoot in. You can see there's a little bit of a Benny Hill theme going on with my Grail Reliquary. I'm just trying to scurry away because he was hunting it very aggressively. But it's been good. I mean, my men-at-arms and infantry have been holding and really buying me a lot of time. I was ahead on the balance of power, as you guys probably saw a minute ago. It was like up to like this area right here, but it has come back to the middle. So my opponent has, his Zerg has just been pushing forth and conquering a lot of my units. And honestly, the Royal Pegasus Knights are up to 98 kills, but a lot of those are against Fellbats and zombies. And I wanted to experiment with them this game, but I haven't found them to be terribly effective. I think one more group of Grail Knights would have been much more powerful. So they're just going to be flying around, cycle charging here, but this is a rough situation. A lot of skeleton spears and stuff like that. I get an Earthblood off, I think, or was that his invocation? It looks like that was actually his invocation of Nehek. So I'm just using the last of my troops to keep this blob at bay, because I still do have some fire arrows here, but I'm running out of ammunition. These guys have one more volley here, these ones have two, and then these guys have about two left as well. So I have the Grail Reliquary. I'm just kind of holding it back for the final fight. And I am going to be counter-pushing here. So you can see some Foot Squires and some Knights of Bretonnia are just going to be charging in here, doing their best to hold back the tides of the undead, and King Lewin just being a true king of his people. And he's in pretty good shape still. He's about half health. It's still not terribly close to his healing cap, and he's been putting a bit of working on Vlad. I popped the Sword of Corone, which is going to make my archers much more effective here, also make my men-at-arms a little bit more effective, and the Grail Knights, who are going to be charging in, get a nice little charge right there, just going to be pinning some of these undead units down and allowing King Lewin to make a very dramatic retreat there. So I'll be pulling back up in the air and then coming after Vlad. And the reason I pulled back there initially is because I did get that Master of Bagamut. So balance of power is still dead even. I do have some troops rallying here on the far side, the Royal Pegasus Knights, and then it looks like there's 16 men-at-arms with polearms over there. And my peasant archers are 100% out of ammunition. So this is pretty stressful, because even though the balance of power looks to be in my favor right now, I was like, oh man, I don't really have any like true combat troops left. So these peasants are going to have to come in and fight. They're 10 melee attack, but at least a lot of my opponent's troops are the Tithe and Skeleton Spears and just kind of chaff units. So you can see the peasants of Bretonnia are going to be rushing into the aid of their king here in just a moment, or they're just going to stand and watch. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I attack ordered them, but I can't recall. But some Foot Squires coming back in the fourth quarter, which is going to be really nice, especially with the support of the Grail Reliquary just trotting in there. And that's going to be, of course, keeping them in the fight, despite the fact that they have like 5 models left. Yeah, it looks like 18 here. Stand your ground going down as well. So just a very, very wild one here. These Royal Pegasus Knights coming into the back, which is always good against undead. Sometimes if you have a very close fight with undead or vampire counts, or even against Tomb Kings, if you can rear charge, it'll like take off a significant amount of HP simply because it'll temporarily put them below negative leadership. But you can see the Royal Pegasus Knights, going down for the lady, having a good old time. And yeah, it's just a very, very close fight. So balance of power is now coming into my favor. Vlad is getting a little bit beat up, and he is at his healing cap. My opponent has done a very good job using the Karstein Ring. Every time I came in with Lewin and it was off cooldown, he was able to use that. But at this point, Vlad's probably just going to get manhandled. I mean, Lewin is probably a stronger duelist. I mean, definitely is. His armor-piercing galleys are just so much better. Vlad, of course, is very tanky, has great utility, has access to magic, but there's the Karstein Ring, so 90% ward save, which is pretty insane. So at this point, I was like, oh man, the peasants, I guess, have to charge in, and yeah, here you go. You can see the archers coming in to finish the job. So the peasant hordes, and that's kind of a cool thematic way to look right there, seeing these Grail Knights fighting side by side with the peasant archers. So looks like the Vampire Count's chaff is going to be crumbling as their leader, begins to fall. The Karstein Ring is active, but from here, King Lewin should be able to go up in the air and get a nice little charge and finish him off. And it looks like Vlad is going to be the last man standing, just, leaving this world with his face in the dirt as King Lewin just dumpsters him here. So that's pretty much it. So well played to my opponent. It was a fierce one for sure. Definitely a fun opportunity to get to use some of those Pegasus Knights who I haven't had too much success with them. I just feel like, they got 135 kills, but it was mostly against chaff units. And I guess they give you some decent battlefield control, the Mortis Engine, whereas like a group of Grail Knights would have had to go up and around. These guys can go directly after targets, but I was actually playing Total War Warhammer 1 relatively recently with Dob Plays. We were playing some Norske games, and we used Royal Pegasus Knights, and the way that they engage in Total War Warhammer 1, when they would actually attack something, like all the models just kind of pile in and get a massive burst of damage. But in Total War Warhammer 2, it seems they changed the pathing, and they're just not as good as they used to be. Still something worth considering, perhaps, in a couple matchups, but ultimately I feel like they're just a little bit lackluster compared to the regular, Knights of Bretonnia. Like Grail Knights, who come with more models, have great charge bonus. They have the new Lance Formation, which you don't get punished for using, which I used a little bit this game, but I was kind of sloppy with it. But regardless, still fun to experiment. And Dwellers Below, as you guys saw, was definitely generating some pretty massive value against Vampire Counts blobs and Mortis Engine style of play. So the Damsel with Lore of Life definitely worth considering with the Dwellers Below. So very well played to my opponent, Status NR25. Look forward to running into you again on ladder. And hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the Knights of Bretonnia, or the Knight of Bretonnia. I guess there was only one group of knights here, so it was, whatever, still knights. Knights of Bretonnia in action. So thanks again for watching, guys. Have an excellent night, and take care.